Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, Catch Cup is usually a cup that comes at the end of each Go Battle League season, and in that cup you can only use Pokemon that you caught within that season. I really want to make a video for Catch Cup, but I was looking through everything I have built from this season, and it turns out I actually don't have that much built. Like, I literally just have these 7 Pokemon. I have a rank 1 Skuntank that I could build also, but I don't know if that's going to be useful. Most of these Pokemon are really weak to fighting, grass, ground, so I guess I could try to build a team around my Bastiodon, which is probably the best Pokemon I've built this season. I have this Carbink, it's second moved also, it's not fully XL. I could use that. I got it from the research that came with buying the Global Go Fest ticket early, so we have that. But here's the problem. If I put, let's say I put Quagsire in the lead, this team is really weak to grass. Even the Quagsire lead isn't enough to handle what this backline is weak to, so this backline is pretty weak to water. Quagsire isn't a solid answer to water. The backline's pretty weak to Medicham as well, or fighters, and Quagsire is not a solid answer to fighters either. Greninja, weak to fighting as well. I'm not sure. Poliwrath also weak to Medicham, which is going to be, I'm expecting it's going to be quite common in this cup. Haxorus? I don't think so. I don't know if I should use that. So I want to build a team around the Bastiodon and the Carbink because they're pretty tanky. They're the best 2 Pokemon here, I think. I could lead this, but then my team would be very weak to ground types. Cantomuck isn't an answer to water types either. It'll take care of the grass types at least. Also, Medicham has Psychic for Cantomuck. It's a pure poison type, so it will take super effective from Psychic. So what I'm thinking is, in the lead, I'm gonna need a grass type that can beat fighters, and it's also gonna beat those water types. You know what would be good here? Either Trevenant or Whimsicott. That would be really good. But I need to hope I have one. I don't know if I have any saved. I transfer them as soon as I get them if they're not good. So let's see if I have... I have a Phantom. It's probably not good IV. Let me see if I have Cottony. Ooh, okay, yeah. I have one I can use. Okay, maybe. This might still work. Let's see if I can make that. Okay, so I'm gonna build the Bastiodon and I'm gonna build the Cottony. It's gonna cost all my Stardust, unfortunately, and I would have rather built the Hundo Xerneas that I got from raids last week. But maybe after Go Fest I'll have enough resources to build it. I was really excited to use it, but I want to make this Catch Cup video. But yeah, let's build this Bastiodon. Let's go to Bestie. Give that a second move. And then, oof, that Stardust, 94,000 left. Let's hope this Whimsicott doesn't take as much. Ooh, this is the one I caught on my trip to Switzerland, so it has good memories. And you know what? Maybe the Whimsicott was a better pick than the Trevenant because I was not going to have enough Stardust to give Trevenant a second move. I think it's 75k for a second move. So Whimsicott, because I'm really cheap and poor right now, definitely the better option for me. Okay, Whimsicott, how much do you need to power up? Please don't be too much. 78,000. Will I have enough for a second move? Yeah. Oof. Okay, bye-bye Stardust. All of it. Yes, power up. Yep. And we have just enough to put the second move on it. I'm gonna be left with 6,000 Stardust. Oof, that hurts. That hurts. Oh, let's give it the right fast move also. Fairy Wind. Okay, Fairy Wind, Seed Bomb, Moonblast. That looks good. Okay, let's use these in battle. I'm currently around 3,080 elo. Let's hope this is worth it. Leave a like because I used all my Stardust, please. Alright, first battle. We have Whimsicott into Swampert. Already a 1 lead. My opponent immediately swaps into Noctowl and I bring in Carbink. Now I'm thinking if I want to farm him down all the way, but in hindsight, I think that this was probably the more greedy option. I could have thrown a Rock Slide and then had enough to throw the Moonblast against the Swampert, but I wanted to farm him down all the way. Now my opponent can reach a third Shadow Ball and take me out if I decide not to commit that shield. But I want to maintain alignment, so I use my shield. Now I'm going to throw my energy on Swampert, throwing that Moonblast, and then my opponent decides to bring in Venusaur. I think it would have been more beneficial for my opponent to farm me down completely with his Swampert, and then he would have so much energy on Swampert to then possibly swap out, save that energy, and throw at Bastiodon later. Also, I got really lucky that I brought Carbink into Noctowl, because if I had brought Basti into Noctowl, Carbink would have been aligned with Venusaur, and Carbink is part Rock type. That means it takes super effective from Frenzy Plant. So that wouldn't have been good for us. Also, Whimsicott doesn't have coverage for Venusaur, so it's very possible that Venusaur could have swept me if I hadn't switched Carbink into Noctowl. But lucky for us, we accidentally RPS our opponent, and we take that win. Whimsicott stays aligned with Swampert exactly where we want it to be. Now this next match I misplay really badly, but I'm going to show it to you guys anyways because we're all humans and we all make mistakes, and you guys can learn from my mistakes. We have Whimsicott into Toxicroak, and now I need to make a call on whether or not my opponent is going to bait, and I shield. That's the first mistake I make. They almost always have to bait, because if my opponent didn't bait, this would have definitely been a loss for him. I also went for the bait, but my opponent is smarter than me and didn't shield. I don't want to invest my second shield, so I wait a turn and I catch a Sludge Bomb on my Bastiodon. He's in farm down range for Basti. My opponent saves a move on Toxicroak and swaps out into Palossand. I really appreciate my opponent picking this Pokemon, but my entire backline is weak to it. I'm just going to go for these Flamethrowers which are neutral against the Palossand, and what my opponent is going to do is he's going to farm up as much as he can and then CMP time me on the next Flamethrower. Now this game is still very winnable if I don't make a big mistake, like, I don't know, maybe not shielding the Shadow Ball, which I do. I don't know why I decided to do that, but yeah, it was game over after that. The Palossand actually wiped out my Carbink. It was embarrassing. Okay, on to the next match. We have the most amazing lead Whimsicott can see, a Poison type. I save swap Carbink and my opponent brings in Greninja, but this isn't the worst because you have a really bulky Pokemon versus a really squishy Pokemon, and these rock throws are chunking at Greninja's health. And I know that one Hydrocan is not going to be enough to take me out, but unfortunately my opponent is going to be able to farm me down right before I get to the Rock Slide, and now he has a ton of energy to throw at Whimsicott, and Whimsicott's pretty squishy, so this is going to do quite a bit of damage to Whimsicott even though it's resisted. Whimsicott farms down Greninja completely, and I'm expecting him to bring in Toxapex, and I bring in my Bastiodon immediately into another Bastiodon. So you know how this goes. I'm not going to make you guys watch two brick walls throwing rocks at each other. Alrighty, moving on to the next match. Are you guys ready to see the spiciest pick of all spice? Beautifly. I'm so happy to see this, but at the same time, I don't know if it has a flying type move, so I attempt to catch whatever move it might have on Carbink. Luckily, we lure out the Poliwrath. This is exactly where we want to see Poliwrath, and this Poliwrath is running Dynamic Punch. I reach the Moonblast, and my opponent thinks I bait. That's why we always go for the nuke, because they're always going to think you're going to bait. Luckily, he doesn't shield. Now he brings in Blastoise. And my opponent decides to shield the Rock Slide, which I don't think my opponent should have done because Carbink is bulky and it doesn't do that much damage. These Seed Bombs are going to hurt a lot more. We take a second shield with the first Seed Bomb, and now I'm going to respect the Ice Beam, so I'm going to shield myself. And my opponent brings back in Beautifly and immediately throws whatever he had built up to, but because I wasn't sure what it was, I shielded. Now I can bring Bastiodon back in and completely farm down the Beautifly, but I have to give props to my opponent. He's using whatever he has. This is the essence of Catch Cup. You just use whatever you catch during the season, and I respect the spice. My opponent came back in with Blastoise and built up to 2 Hydro Cannons, but because Bastiodon is so tanky, my opponent has to throw all his energy here, and he's going to have nothing left for Whimsicott, and we take that win. GG's to my opponent and mad respect for that team. Moving on to the next battle, we have Whimsicott into Whimsicott. So the way I should be playing this is I should be building up to the Moonblast and going for the bait, but we CMP tie on the Moonblast, and the one time I decide to call the bait, I don't get baited. My opponent went straight for that Moonblast, and he shields my Moonblast. I was actually hoping that because I didn't shield, maybe he would be tempted not to shield, thinking I would bait also. But luckily here, instead of farming me down, my opponent throws all his energy on my Whimsicott to take me out, and then for some reason, he swaps out of his Whimsicott and into Haxorus, and now I can actually align my Carbink into Haxorus. And this matchup is going to be a lot better for Carbink because Carbink is going to be taking neutral from the counters, unlike Bastiodon, which is taking double super effective from the counter damage. And we're also resisting that breaking swipe. It looks like my opponent doesn't have Earthquake, he's not building up to it, so he's only throwing the breaking swipes. Now I have energy to throw at Whimsicott, but unfortunately because we were debuffed 3 times, the Moonblast doesn't do too much to Whimsicott. I actually decided to swap out of Carbink because I didn't want that Whimsicott to get too much farm, because it was still healthy, and just in case I needed Carbink for whatever he had in the back, but my opponent has Lantern in the back. Now, I have shield advantage, but this is going to be super tricky. Lantern is so spammy, it can get to the surfs really quickly, and these surfs are going to be doing a ton of damage because we are rock type, and both of the Pokemon I have left are rock types. So what are you going to do? This surf is not going to take me out. It's actually going to get very, very close. I'm going to swap out into Carbink. I get to throw the Rock Slide on the Whimsicott, but it's not enough to take out the Whimsicott. He reaches a move. We do, however, get some farm on Basti, but it's going to get really tight because I'm getting super close to the Stone Edge, but just as I reach it, he KOs me. So GG's to my opponent. That Lantern is a little bit tough for my backline. Alright, next match we have Whimsicott into Poliwrath. A 1 lead for us, so my opponent immediately swaps into Pelipper, and I bring in Bastiodon. I can't bring in a Carbink into this because my Carbink is not XL. It's level 40 and it's too squishy, it can't handle these weather balls. Unlike my Bastiodon, which is super tanky, because it's fully XL and level 50, it's taking those weather balls like a champ, and we take out the Pelipper. However, my opponent did something really smart there, and he didn't throw another weather ball because he wanted to farm me down completely with his Poliwrath and get a lot of energy so that he could throw these ice punches at my Whimsicott. So now my opponent has a ton of energy built up. I can take 1 ice punch on Whimsicott, but he's gonna get a shield out of me if he reaches another. So I'm gonna let him throw and not shield it, and instead of building up to another one, he swaps in Cantomuck, and I immediately bring in Carbink. So this isn't too bad, it's a pretty neutral matchup. I'm expecting the Muck to be running Thunder Punch and Dark Pulse. Dark Pulse is resisted because of Carbink's Fairy typing, and Thunder Punch is just neutral. Poison Jab is also neutral because of Carbink's Rock typing, which resists poison. Now I recognize here that the next Thunder Punch isn't actually going to take me out, and I got to the Rock Slide, so what I can do is I can no-shield this, throw the Rock Slide and take his last shield, and then I'm gonna do the risky play of coming in with Whimsicott and throwing Seed Bomb at this Cantomuck, which is really low health by the way, and hoping that it takes him out. It does, and luckily we have 1 shield left in case the Poliwrath reaches an Ice Punch. See, that was a nice play. Sometimes we play like pros and sometimes we play like potatoes. On to the next match, we get the amazing lead of Noctowl into our squishy grass type. I immediately swap in Carbink. He brings out, of course, the fighter with a grass type move, Surfetched. So we're getting really hard countered in this game. I reach the Moonblast, I'm hoping he doesn't shield it, but of course my opponent's gonna shield it. Now my opponent is going to farm me down completely. And this is really tricky for me because he could throw a Brave Bird on my Whimsicott, so I have to make a call if I want to call the bait or if I shield. I decide to go for a shield, it's a Leaf Blade. And then guess what? The next one is a Brave Bird. So we get hit with a Brave Bird, it one-shots as expected, and then my opponent brings in Chestnut, and it had Frenzy Plant. I couldn't have been more hard countered in that game. Moving on to the next game, we have Whimsicott into Lucario. Immediately, my opponent swaps out of Lucario into Alolan Ninetales. I immediately swap into Bastiodon, and I'm gonna go for the full farm down. That way I have a ton of energy stored up for the Lucario. This Flamethrower is gonna be doing super effective to the Lucario. So I throw the first Flamethrower, and I'm gonna be able to reach a second one. The first one gets his first shield. And is the second one gonna get us a shield? It goes unshielded, and it does so much damage. Now I'm gonna bring in Whimsicott, and I'm expecting him to throw Shadow Ball immediately. He's gonna throw Shadow Ball and not bait because he's not gonna be able to reach a second move, so I'm gonna shield that for sure. He brings in Wigglytuff, and I decide to stay in and throw the Seed Bomb just to soften him up a bit. That way my Carbink, when it comes in, can have an easier time versus his Wigglytuff. I know he only built up to Disarming Voice, so for signs we're not going to shield, I want to see how much it does to my Carbink. I thought he might reach another Disarming Voice if I went for the full farm down, and I didn't want to put myself in farm down range for Lucario, so I went ahead and threw that Rock Slide, but then my opponent surrendered there anyway. Moving on to the next match, we have another amazing lead. Whimsicott into Kanto Sandslash. Kanto Sandslash only has Night Slash and Earthquake, so I resist both of those moves. I was expecting him to catch, but I didn't expect him to catch at 7. So my opponent makes a lucky catch there onto Dragalge, and my immediate instinct is, well, Dragalge is a dragon type, so it's weak to Fairy, and Carbink is Fairy, so I swapped in Carbink. In hindsight, I think Bastiodon would have had a better matchup versus Dragalge. Luckily, I'm able to take one of his shields on the first Rock Slide, and I can reach the second Rock Slide before he reaches a third Aqua Tail. My opponent decides not to give up his second shield, so we maintain alignment. Now my opponent has to throw the Earthquake onto Carbink, so he uses up all his energy. I can easily bring back Whimsicott. I'm just going to wait out the switch timer a little bit. And my opponent has Slurpuff in the back. So that was another RPS game in our favor. GG's to my opponent. On to the final match of the video. We have kind of a one lead. It's Whimsicott into Primarina, but Primarina's charms are doing so much damage. Luckily, Whimsicott is super spammy, so we can reach these Seed Bombs really quickly. I'm going to throw the first Seed Bomb fully expecting my opponent to shield, and I'm either going to take his final shield with this next Seed Bomb, or I'm going to win lead. My opponent decides to shield. I bring in Carbink, and I'm calling that this is not a Hydro Pump. It's a Psychic. I let it go. For science, let's see how much it does to Carbink. I get to the Rock Slide, and this is going to be enough to take out my opponent, and he doesn't have any shields left. He brings in Greninja, and if I were my opponent, I wouldn't have thrown the Hydro Cannon immediately. I would have farmed up a little bit more energy. But now I can bring in Whimsicott into Greninja, and I actually don't want Basti to see Greninja. So what I'm going to do is, because we CMP tied, I went ahead and I invested that shield, and I threw the Seed Bomb to get rid of the Greninja. And now my opponent brings in Haxorus, and because shields are down for my opponent, this is not a bad matchup for us. Especially since it seems like he doesn't have Earthquake since he's going straight for Breaking Swipe. And Haxorus, being super squishy, is not going to be able to survive a Stone Edge from Bastiodon even after it's been debuffed twice. So that gives us the final satisfying win of the set. That's 4-1 in this set, and actually I got another 4-1 directly after, but I wasn't recording. I have the screenshot at the end of this video. But that brings us to the end. If you enjoy my videos, please consider subscribing, maybe leave a like on the video, it helps me out a lot, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye!